The nation's trade deficit increased in May over the prior month, according to the latest data from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. This, as a coalition of 22 Democratic attorneys general continue to challenge the Trump administration's latest proposed tariffs, arguing that they would increase costs for American consumers. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. The May 2026 U.S. International Trade in Goods and Services report shows a deficit of $77.6 billion. That's up 42.2%. Now, total exports valued at $317.7 billion. That's down 3.2%. Imports valued at $395.3 billion, up 3.3%. Again, showing we're importing more than we're exporting. Now, looking at the trends, the monthly deficit continues to tick upwards in the past few months, and with that, it's bringing the 3-month average to move upwards as well. Now, the Bureau says the May increase in the goods and services deficit reflected an increase in the goods deficit of $23.6 billion to $106.5 billion, and an increase in the services surplus of just $0.6 billion to $28.9 billion. Now, year to date, the goods and services deficit decreased $203.9 billion, or about 40.6% year to date. That's from the same time period in 2025. At the same time, exports increased $164.7 billion, or just by 11.7%. So imports decreasing $39.2 billion, or 2.1%. Now, exports of goods decreased $11.3 billion to $210 billion in May. Industrial supply materials decreased by more than $5 billion. Non-monetary gold decreased by $6.2 billion. There's other precious metals in the mix there as well. Natural gas exports decreased $1.1 billion. Crude oil increased $2 billion. You have other indicators of those goods, but imports of goods that increased $12.3 billion to $317 billion in May includes consumer goods, increasing by $3.5 billion. Now, pharmaceutical preparations, when it comes to imports from other countries, that increased $1.9 billion. We're also getting more cell phones and other household goods imported to the country. Industrial supplies and materials increasing $3.1 billion. And crude oil, even though we're exporting more, we're also importing crude oil, about $1.5 billion. That new vehicle you're driving, is that imported? Automotive vehicles, parts, and engines increased $2.2 billion for imports. Passenger cars increased $1 billion. So you can see a variety of different types of goods and services that are being imported or exported, showing that the past month we've got a deficit. Now, the Bureau's May figures show surpluses in the billions of dollars with Netherlands, Hong Kong, South and Central America, Australia, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Singapore, Belgium, and Saudi Arabia. But deficits to specific countries in the billions of dollars was in Vietnam, Mexico, Taiwan, China, the European Union, Canada, Germany, Malaysia, South Korea, India, Ireland, Italy, Switzerland, Japan, France, and Israel. Now, in Congress, there's been a lot of attention on trade. Last November, U.S. Representative Stephanie Bice, she talked about some misconceptions around the import-exports ratio surrounding liquid natural gas exports.
Some argue that LNG exports raise energy prices for Americans by reducing domestic supply. This claim is simply false. Increased export opportunities incentivize production and drive efficiency gains, which will help domestic prices continue to be affordable. Given the abundance of economic and environmental benefits from LNG exports, I believe it's critical that we help protect the industry from misguided political attacks, such as those made by the Biden administration last year. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting in favor of this legislation.
Now, on the issue of other energy exports, the Texas House in April heard testimony about that issue.
There is room to export more crude, but with a flat production outlook, it would have to be driven by SPR releases or draws from commercial crude stocks. This means that expected increases in the volume of Texas exports of primary energy in 2026 in response to higher prices are likely to be muted and weighted more towards crude oil than natural gas. There are other potential tailwinds to Texas in aggregate from this global price situation that I will mention, but the key, as has been mentioned repeatedly today, is that E&P spending to raise domestic drilling and production levels for crude oil and natural gas is the most important channel through which higher oil prices flow through to the broader energy industry and the state economy.
Now, it's not just energy products that work into the overall trade equation. There are plenty of other goods, including technology services. Back in January, U.S. Representative Max Miller, he discussed the impact on digital services around trade.
In 2023, U.S. exports of digitally deliverable services, including cloud computing, software, financial services, and other digitally deliverable business services, total roughly $650 billion, accounting for nearly 2/3 of all U.S. service exports. It's massive. These exports generate a massive trade surplus measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars and support millions of American jobs. This leadership reflects decades of innovation and an open, connected global internet that allows U.S. firms, large and small, to scale globally. But today, that advantage is increasingly under pressure. Around the world, we are seeing a rise in digital protectionism, data localization mandates, discriminatory digital regulations, and policies that raise costs for foreign firms while advantaging local competitors.
There's a lot of different ins and outs when it comes to the global issues around digital products and regulations from different countries. Now, for agricultural products, the U.S. House last month heard testimony about the exports of meat products and the impact that has on domestic jobs.
So we export 25% of our pork production, 15% of beef, and 15% of poultry production. So a decent amount of what we produce is exported, but a lot of what's exported is not consumed in high levels here in the U.S. So that helps bring value back to producers, American farmers and ranchers who are able to send some of those products that see higher demand elsewhere. It also generates additional revenue and income for our corn and soybean farmers, hundreds of millions of dollars, $2.1 billion on the corn side. And to your point on transportation, it supports truckers and transportation networks and ports. So it supports jobs all across the country.
While some concerns are surfacing around trade deficits and how that can reflect worries about hollowing out domestic jobs in manufacturing or weakening national security and domestic supply chain and other concerns, a lot of economists don't see it that way. Economists at the Congressional Research Service, the Peterson Institute of International Economics, and elsewhere, they conclude that trade deficits are not a reliable indicator of economic weakness and often coincide with strength. Trade deficits can reflect a strong economic attracting capital. Now, cheaper imports, they raise real purchasing power, and consumers and overall welfare gains can be an outcome of trade deficits. But there are things that could make a deficit concerning, especially if they come from low national savings rather than high productive investments. They can also create dependency on foreign goods from adversarial nations and impact capital inflows. Now, the next release of the nation's trade deficit report is set to be August 4th. We'll keep an eye out.